You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. We're going to be going over some of the best decks in our Brilliant Stars format, and a lot has changed. We just saw Liverpool Regionals results. Shout out to Robin for winning with that Rapid Strike Urshifu checkmate counter kind of list. Really cool stuff. But we'll see if it made the list today. I think it's one of those things where there's a lot of interesting decks that have been seeing success or a lack thereof or anything else like that. So these lists are forever changing. That being said, let me know in the comments below what your best guesses are for the top 10 decks. And also in the pinned comments below, there are going to be copies of these lists that you can copy paste right into PTCGO. You could also watch any of the reference videos for many of these videos, and if they're not there, I'm in the process of creating them. They're on my whiteboard right over there. So let me know if there's anything else that you need in the comments below. Totally love to spark a discussion. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're trying to pick up any of the cards for this deck, go to ptcgostore.com, plug in code ZLesage5. You could also go to atlascollectibles.com, plug in code ZLesage8 if you're trying to pick up any physical cards. And if you're trying to learn a little bit more about the game, go to metafy.gg/@ZachLesage, and I will gladly help you grow as a competitive player. That being said, let's jump into our number 10 spot. Let's get it. Galloping into number 10, all the way up from number 17 last week, is Ice Rider Calyrex VMAX. The goal is to go Melanie onto your Ice Rider, and then either attack with Ride of the High King to 2-hit things, or poke at things, or you could go Max Lands and try to go for that OHKO, or using it to get that last bit of KO. Drizzile, like in many decks that you'll see in this video, is used for shady dealings to search out effectively whatever trainer cards you're looking for. Then most decks pair it with either the quick shooting Inteleon to add a couple of extra damage counters here or there, and or the shady dealings Inteleon just to be able to search things out. Overall, this deck is like relatively powerful. It's more of a neutral spread than anything else, because it just doesn't necessarily win or lose against a lot of these top decks. It's okay. You're going to be in a fight for every single game, and I think that's why it holds on to like these like mid spots, because it's very much a mid deck. And I think like we're going to see this deck either fall in popularity because we saw some really cool decks coming out of Liverpool, or we might see it stay in a similar position. You can see that it fluctuates between the bottom half of the top 20 all the way up to about 10th spot right now. Splashing into number 9 and moving down from number 7 last week is Suicune V Ludicolo. Very similar to the Ice Rider deck we just saw, this deck's going to be all about using Melanie onto Suicune and accelerating that Blizzard Rondo attack. Blizzard Rondo does 20 plus, 20 for each bench Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's, and you try to get those extra bench Pokemon in play with an Echoing Horn, or your opponent naturally benches them, and you also have access to Ludicolo to increase your damage outputs. This deck is a very combo heavy deck, and I think that's one of the reasons what causes players to either A, make mistakes with it, B, just miss those combos. On top of this deck having a bit of a shaky match with some other decks in formats, also, like just including like if decks in play Path to the Peak or Collapse Stadium, there's no stadiums in this deck to get around it or anything else like that, so it can be a little bit tough. Going forward, Suicune Ludicolo seems to be slipping out of favor because players are either not playing it correctly or it's just not really ready for the format. Finnegan Lynch just came second at Salt Lake City with this regionals, but it's one of those things where it's just doing okay. So I think that this deck is probably appropriately placed. I wouldn't be surprised if this deck slipped out of the metagame again. Starbirthing all the way into number 8 and moving on up from number 16 last week is Arceus VSTAR Inteleon with Galar Birds. So this is a deck that Nicholas Moffat and Ian Robb played to Salt Lake City Regionals. The goal is to play this deck kind of like a dark toolbox Galar Bird Arceus Toolbox Arc Inteleon hybrid, which is really cool. It gives you a lot of options that you could just go Arceus and be an Arceus deck and be Arceus Inteleon and all that kind of good stuff, or maybe you want to play it out and sacrifice a few prize cards, drop down a Galarian Moltres with Clara and stuff like that, or maybe you accelerate onto a Galarian Moltres V and you're ready to attack, or Zapdos V can be incredibly powerful in Mirror. This deck does have options. Where this deck does seem to struggle is somewhere in the consistency factor. I think that is just not as consistent as other Arceus decks in my experience, and I think that other players are starting to see that as well, the same way that we see Dark Toolbox slipping down the ladder completely and just not really seeing a lot of success is the same reason why I think that this deck is just struggling a little bit. It did just shoot up a little bit, but for a deck to make top 4 and top 8 out of regionals and to kind of fall down here, it makes me wonder if they're just favoring other Arceus builds, such as Arceus and Inteleon. We'll have to see as the metagame progresses. Stinging the competition at number 8 and jumping down from number 7 last week is Arceus Beedrill Sandaconda. So I guess this archetype is more Arceus VSTAR with Beedrill. Like many Arceus VSTAR decks, you're going to be using Starbirth or to search out whatever you're really looking for in your deck. I mean, you get that one pivotal turn, and you can use it early game, mid game, late game, depending on what you're looking for, whatever. You're using either Trinity Nova, Trinity Charge to accelerate those energies to your other Pokemon, and I mean, in this case, there's a Sandaconda, which can be good against fighting weak type Pokemon, and there's Beedrill that's great against special energy type Pokemon. There's a good Flygon in there, just for good measure, but overall, these are the type of builds where you can Starbirth for like Ultra Balls and Quick Balls, and then use Single Strike Mustard to like get a Beedrill out of nowhere and get a knockout. This deck's really cool, again, by Charlie Lockyer and their group of friends. Seeing success at Salt Lake City Regionals. I believe they got a top 16 finish there. I think this deck's like picking up a little bit of traction, but again, similar to the Arceus Galar Birds that we saw that it's tied at number 8 with, I think these decks were well equipped for the Salt Lake City metagame. Things have changed a little bit in the past week between the late night series events and the results from Liverpool, that we might see these decks either go up or down drastically depending on how the metagame adapts. So we'll have to see how it goes, but right now it's a pretty solid deck. Causing fear and panic at number 6 and dropping from number 5 is Gengar VMAX. Now this is my current take on the deck by adding in more Peko and basically some single prizers just to kind of adapt to the metagame, with Malamar seeing a lot of success. And I mean, of course this deck does well against Mew. The goal is to single strike roar to your various Pokemon, in this case mainly Gengar VMAX, and you can basically use fear and panic with a lot of Pokemon V in your opponent's side of the field, or go for the knockout with Gmax Swallow Up. A similar deck to this won the Salt Lake City Regionals with Drew Kennett playing Arceus with Gengar VMAX. That deck's kind of fallen off, so this seems like the best way to be playing Gengar right now is kind of the straight up Houndoom build, or at least that's what's accepted by the majority of the community. Path to the Peak does shut down a lot of things as well. I do think that this deck is probably appropriately placed right now, but I could see it going up to the number 5 spots. Maybe with the single prize card Pokemon, this deck could move up a spot or two, so I heavily encourage you to try this new take on the deck, because it does seem like it will do quite well against the metagame right now. Skyscrapering over the rest of the competition and moving up 3 spots from last week is Arceus VSTAR Duraludon VMAX. Now, Arceus here is trying to power up the Duraludon V and Duraludon VMAX, and there's a 2-3 Duraludon line because you have access to the Single Strike Mustard to summon one out of play, very similar to the Beedrill deck that we saw. Single Strike and Rapid Strike Mustard are both heavily underrated in this format because we now have Ultra Ball ways to basically thin our hand down. When you're accelerating those energies with Trinity Nova, Trinity Charge, and Starbirthing out whatever pieces you're looking for, you're basically trying to block your opponent out from having special energies with the Skyscraper attack or the Skyscraper ability, and then attacking with Gmax Pulverization over and over with Duraludon VMAX. It's an incredibly effective strategy if your opponent doesn't play special energies, or if they do play special energies, and then you're able to just go Crystal Cave, Hyper Potion, take that damage away, and you can also just toss away a double Turbo Energy if you need to. I mean, overall, this deck's just trying to block some popular decks out of the format. Some decks are just cutting their counters completely, other decks are adding them back in. I think it's kind of just like Decidueye decks when players play counters or not. Could see one of those cases where Duraludon VMAX is pretty, it's just doing better because a lot of players are not seeing counters. I could also see this deck taking a steep dip over the next week or two, depending on if this deck's going to shoot up a little bit more or if it's going to fall off. We'll have to see. Zapping into number 4 and staying consistent at number 4 from last week is Jolteon VMAX. I think this is really where we're starting to get a solidified list, and that might be exciting for some, it might not be exciting for others. Jolteon VMAX is all about its Max Thunder Rumble attack, doing 100 damage to the active, 100 damage to the bench. Get that bench damage with Quick Shooting or Headbutt Tantrum on Zigzagoon or Inteleon. and this deck has some disruptive elements with Path to the Peak and Marnie. This deck has been seeing a little bit of success because it does have Path to the Peak against popular Mew decks. It does do pretty well against Arceus Inteleon decks, and of course, if Malamar decks or any other single prize card decks are not running Manaphy, you can absolutely just like run through those decks. I think Jolteon's success will heavily rely on if other decks play extra copies of stadiums to get around Path to the Peak, if decks start running Manaphy, or if we see fighting type decks rise. I think it might be the case where Jolteon might fall off a little bit this week. However, I do think it's a solid choice, kind of like an upgraded Ice Rider where you could do well against everything, except Jolteon's a little bit more skill-based in my opinion right now. Starbirthing into number 3 and staying consistent from number 3 last week is Arceus Inteleon. You can see that there's a steep jump from this deck from the Jolteon deck and most of the other decks on this list. The goal of this deck is to play like a traditional Arceus Inteleon deck, where you're just accelerating energies to Arceus Inteleon using that Charon's Care, but there's also some other stadiums or supporters that we can play in this deck as well, such as Sydney, Clara, Melanie, very similar to the decks that have been seeing success at regionals, taking a lot of nods from Xander Perot and Isaiah Bradner's list with the Sydney. I mean, there's just a lot of opportunities that you could Starbirth, search for any single card in your deck and make things happen. Where I really took a lot of success, or where I really like the deck, is that it plays Galarian Zapdos V, that you could just go ahead and use that to attack against an Arceus VSTAR, a Gengar, a Jolteon, and then if they knock it out, you could Clara and get it back. I wouldn't mind just cutting one of the support stadiums, the Path to the Peak, for something else. Maybe like a Collapse Stadium would be really cool, but we'll have to see how this deck really grows. I think Arceus and Inteleon lists are very, very similar, yet very unique at the same time. This is my current take on it. I'd love to hear what tech cards you play in your Arceus and Inteleon deck in the comments below. Right now, I've been loving the Zapdos. I think it's really cool. Rapid Strike and all the way to number 2, and number 2 from last week is Malamar. Malamar has been moving way up, and I know it shows number 2 from last week, but it had from the previous week number 17 jump all the way up to that. You can see with 860 CP, it's getting a lot of approval from the community. This is the best single prize card deck in format, and with this Inteleon build that's inspired by Tord's Metafy run and Gabe Shumway taking that to a top 16 finish at Salt Lake City Regionals, Malamar's on top of the game, or pretty close. It's almost at the top of the hill, and you'll see in a second. Malamar is about using Rapid Strike Tentacles. You're ripping Rapid Strike Pokemon from your hands. You can get them with Octillery, and the goal is to try to not play Rapid Strike cards down or thin them from your hand or anything. Cynthia's Ambition is great. Karina's Focus is great as a backup plan, but typically you want to play Cynthia's over Karina's so that you can put Karina's back with Malamar, and you're trying to thin out the Rapid Strike cards from your hand so you can always have ammo for Rapid Strike Tentacles. This deck works pretty great, and I think that it's one of those things where this deck might want to start adding Manaphy back in, especially with players likely starting to counter it, playing Jolteon and Rapid Strike. So it's really one of those things where we're going to see those decks that have been seeing a lot of success as well, or starting to see a lot of success. Those decks might have to see a little bit less success, or you might have to play Manaphy going forward. So I'll have to see how it plays out, but I do think Malamar is going to hold on strong, at least within the top 5 going forward. And here we are at our number 1 spot, previously number 1 for the past like 4-5 months now. Mew VMAX with Genesect. Mew VMAX is Cross Fusion Strike. Its attack is going to copy off any Fusion Strike Pokemon that you have on your bench. So maybe you want to copy Psychic Leap, Techno Blast, Melodious Echo. Meloetta is going to be that turn 1 killer using Ellis's Sparkle and Fusion Strike Energy to try to hit for that 210. And of course, you have Genesect with that crazy draw Fusion Strike system, drawing all those different cards every single turn to just have that gigantic hand and kind of rolling through their deck. This is my current take on the list. It's been working incredibly well for me in testing with the 4 stadiums. I only think you need 3 switching cards right now, especially with double turbo energies. It does give you that extra space, and everything else seems to fit in this deck to make it very consistent. Overall, Mew does seem like it's uncounterable in a lot of ways, but it's not seeing the 2000 CP days like it used to. It's now seeing 1200 CP, and the next deck is almost at 900 CP. So you can see we're quickly closing the gap to Mew being the best deck in format. It still might end up being the best deck in format, but to me it seems that Mew is more or less a viable choice nowadays in a lot of cases. Or let's say if you just don't really know the metagame, Mew's probably the best choice to go for you. But otherwise there might be better, more specialized decks in a different field. So keep your eyes peeled. I do think Mew VMAX is incredibly strong, incredibly viable, but there are a lot more viable decks in the format that are, of course, going to eat into the CP counts. And that's what we got going on for this video today. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing what the top 10 best decks are. Looks like Mew might be on its way out. It's continuously like going down in the CP ranks. It's still holding on to that #1 spot, but it's not as firm as elite as it was before. I really thought at one point Malamar was going to catch it this week, and it might be the case for the following week, or maybe the new Rapid Strike Urshifu checkmate list that might be in tomorrow's top 20 best decks video. It just needs a little bit more like play behind it, right? Like, so I think what everyone wants to do is just like play with all these new decks. Metagame's probably going to shake up a lot, and we'll see how it goes. Again, in the pinned comment, there is going to be all of the access to the list that you copy and paste right into PTCGO, PTCG Live, all that good stuff. You could also watch all the reference videos for there. It does help support the channel. Hit that like button, support the channel. Hit that subscribe button, support the channel. Would really be great. We're on our road to 11,000 subs. Let's get it. And again, if you are trying to pick up any of the cards for these decks, go to ptcgostore.com, get them online, or you go to atlascollectibles.com, use code ZELASAGE8 to get them in real life. And again, if you are trying to get a coaching session with me, grow your in-game skills, all that kind of great stuff, hit me up on metafy.gg/@ZachLaSage. All those links are in the description. That being said, I gotta rush to edit this video. Right now it's almost 11 a.m. Eastern. I'm gonna make it. I think we're gonna get it happen. Hopefully the upload times are good. I'll catch up with all y'all later. Stay tuned for a great week of content. Peace out and have a great one. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video, and have yourself a great day. Thanks.